my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo. Where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello, and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course. And man, we are back after a week off. I hope everybody had an amazing Thanksgiving. I spent mine, I should say, with my close family, my mom, my dad, my sister, my brother-in-law, and then my niece and my nephew. And it was nice to just relax. It was nice to have that week off. And man, I didn't even check emails all of last week, pretty much. I happened to glance at one of my email accounts and it was wild. So that was nice. That was a nice little break, much needed. And yeah, I'm back refreshed. And I was reflecting over this holiday week and just how much having connection to my culture, how life-changing that has been for me. And it's like little subtle things that maintain that connection and just make me feel a type of way, in a good way, whenever I'm around them, be it music, be it just hearing Spanish being spoken, little traditions, right? Food. There is something about that attachment to our culture that makes me feel so much like myself. And in the spirit of kind of what the roots of this podcast, are or is, I wanted to touch base on that, especially as we go into this holiday season, the end of the year, and there are so many little traditions depending on your background and where your family's from, where you're from. But I feel like there is a real chance that we lose a lot of our culture, particularly those of us, here living here in the States, if we don't make a concerted effort to preserve it. Right? I don't think I ever made an effort until recently to recognize the fact that as time goes on, as I begin to develop more and more of my adult life, if I don't make it a point to bring certain aspects of my culture with me, I can very easily lose it, being in the suburbs and even just being in areas that are extremely diverse. It's very easy to, become Americanized. And I think many of us have, right? And that's the idea of this podcast to a degree. And for many people wanting to find a way to connect back to their roots, right? That's what so much of this journey has been for me. And I recognize how much of a profound positive impact it's had on my life, creating this connection to culture. So I kind of wanted to just do an episode on that and touch base on that and kind of as we get into the holiday season, maybe challenge some of you and myself included to make it a concerted effort to establish a tradition for ourselves or to maintain an old one that keeps us grounded and connected to our roots. So I have an article that I reference here that actually talks about how important it is for children to be connected to their roots, their culture specifically. And then I guess, will give a bit of my own anecdotal experience as well on the topic. So yeah, let's first touch base with this article that I'm referencing here, and we'll do it in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the
So I've talked a ton about, I guess, so many struggles with identity as a kid, right? And particularly growing up and going when I started going to school in the suburbs of New Jersey, unbeknownst to me, I think having a bit of an identity crisis and not recognizing until in my, well into my adulthood, I think how much of an effect that sort of had on my confidence and the way that I carried myself, the way that I approached life, the way that I entered rooms. And I found this article. Now, don't be scared. It is from a church. So, if regardless of your religious backgrounds or beliefs, this has nothing to do with that. But Churches of Christ, um, and it's an article about foster, being a foster parent, and sort of the idea of, I guess, raising kids that are from a different culture and how to maintain that. But I just found it to be really interesting. And it's actually from Australia. It speaks about Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander children. But I thought there were so many little things as I was kind of just like thumbing through articles that they hit on that I think, we have to be reminded of or reaffirmed. And regardless if you have kids or not, I think it even provides maybe a reflection as an adult of the importance of if you didn't grow up strongly attached to your culture, the importance of trying to reconnect as an adult or to carry it around for your own, carry that torch on for your own kids, whatever it might be. But they reference in this article. They say it's vital for a child's development that they maintain their cultural and community links, key parts of a child's identity. Children with a strong sense of identity are more likely to develop strong self-esteem, confidence, and grow into resilient adults. And I'll pause for a second here, and actually, I'll read because it's not a long thing. I'll read through the article, then I'll kind of jump in here, but. They say children benefit from their heritage. When children and young people are continually immersed in their culture, they develop a sense of pride and belonging. Here are some benefits for children who remain connected to their culture and community, regardless of their move into kinship care or foster care. They say strong identity. Children who maintain close links to their community and culture develop a clear sense of who they are, giving them a strong grounding as they move forward through life. Self esteem. Children who remain immersed in their culture develop a strong sense of belonging, which gives them confidence to learn, explore, and grow. Resilience. Children with a strong self esteem are more likely to develop greater resilience and are able to successfully navigate life's ups and downs. They go on to say respect. Children and young people who can learn from elders are provided with role models who can teach them in a culturally appropriate way how to live in harmony with people and the planet. Language preservation. Children who continue to practice their language feel a strong sense of identity and community. Maintaining traditions, continuing with cultural observances, ceremonies, and traditions is important to a child and young person's sense of self and their place in their community. Now, I just threw a whole lot at you here, but I wanted to touch on a couple things, right? Because as I'm looking at this, I recognize so many things that I struggled with as a kid, right? And truthfully, I didn't really put the pieces together as far as the cultural connection or lack thereof. And for me, I think I exist in some weird area of, you know, very much so being a part of a proud Puerto Rican family. I always say my father is the mayor of proud Puerto Ricans. Grew up going to Puerto Rico every summer as a kid. So there was that connection, but it was very much existed in the bubble that was my house, right? And there was also, I think, this performative sort of element where because we were probably the only Latin family on my block for a long time, and then maybe one of a handful as I got older, it was always like we had to prove that we belonged there, right? This sort of unspoken thing that I think my parents showcased through some of their actions, some of the things that they put on to me. I mean, I've always talked about how my mom wouldn't let me get a certain haircut. I believe it was like a dark Caesar, like a Caesar with the skin fade, very much lined up in the front, because that was like the stereotypical haircut of Puerto Ricans in the Bronx, right? And she didn't want me to be judged here in the suburbs, as I went to school. Even though I did definitely face some what felt like some preferential punishment, or I don't know if that's the right word. Um, Definitely some eyeballs that were paid placed on me that weren't on others around me, I would say. But I think, as I'm like reflecting, reading this, and as I was like prepping for the show today, I'm like thinking to myself, man, how much of an impact did that kind of have on me, right? Feeling like I had to sort of play these different characters, right? And sort of like being proud of being Puerto Rican, but at the same time, those around me sort of viewing it as something lesser than, almost, right? Like the community at large. And, because of, I guess, my complexion, the ability to sort of pick and choose what crowd I would run with, almost, right? That privilege that I had. And I think in that, I'm definitely somebody who feels like he can fit in anywhere he goes, and can make it work. But I think it also caused me to not know myself, right? And that's what they talk about, the identity part and the self-esteem part that comes along with, I think, proudly being a part of a community, and that being viewed as something that is a positive, right? Whereas, like, in my case, we had to prove to be one of the good ones, almost, which then is like a slap in the face, or a backwards compliment, almost. The idea that, like, you're the good one amongst a, like, disposable group of people, a disposable ethnicity of people, right? And I think, I can definitely reflect and say, hey, there's definitely a lot of little nuances like that we could probably point to and say, this might be why I struggled with certain things of confidence, and never really feeling like I fit in anywhere, and why, as I've gotten older, I feel like I've really found myself the more I've sort of doubled back into learning my culture, my community, and ingratiating myself into it. And I definitely can see the sort of positive and the beauty within that as well, I think. And they mention language preservation and maintaining traditions. I want to touch on that because I think there's something. I don't know. Definitely, when it comes to language, my opinion has changed a little bit. So I want to touch on that. It's funny. My opinion has definitely changed since I started life as a gringo to now. There is some different thoughts that I have on the idea of language preservation. So I'm thinking I'll pause here. We'll take a quick break, and then we'll be right back. All right, we are back, and I want to continue on the topic of language preservation. Now, when we first started life as a gringo, I wholeheartedly was one of those people who was like, you don't need to know how to speak Spanish to be in touch with your culture, or to be a quote unquote real Latino. And in many ways, I still do believe that. I don't think your language dictates your cultural identity or lack thereof. But I do think, in terms of truly forming a deeper bond and connection, language preservation and being able to speak, in our case, Spanish, is essential. And I say that as somebody who's not great at speaking Spanish. And again, I'm not shunning or judging anybody who can't speak Spanish, or is like myself, who is learning and struggling and doing their best. But what I have recognized is, the more I've challenged myself, because I make it a point now, especially like I've talked about, when I'm in Puerto Rico, I do my best to just speak Spanish. And I put myself in embarrassing situations to do so, right? But what I've noticed in that process is, it definitely gives me just that deeper connection. I feel a bit more of the warmth from those that I'm communicating with. And I think also, you know, Spanish is such a beautiful language, and I think even culturally, there are so many little sayings, right, and nuances and expressions that we use throughout the entire Latin diaspora. Each country has their own sort of slang or ways of phrasing things, whatever it might be, communicating. And when you are able to dig that one layer deeper and go beyond just like the sort of standard surface level stuff, but then really get into some of like the silly sayings that have been passed down from generation to generation, or get into some of the daily slang that is used, in your particular motherland. It I don't know, I feel it in my heart. I feel that deeper just I'm a part of something. And again, not to say you're not a part of it if you're not able to speak Spanish or you don't understand all these nuances. What I'm saying is if you really want that deep, authentic, and like you're just challenging yourself, like how much more of myself can I get to know through my culture? Language is a huge part of that. And there's something beautiful about it. Like when I get off the plane, when I land in Puerto Rico and I hear people talking in Spanish, there's like this relief that comes over me. And it actually, when I come back, oftentimes it like takes me a little bit. It's like almost like a culture shock when I land in here in Newark. Usually, it's like a culture shock when all I'm hearing is English around me. There's something that feels cold about it, and yeah, some of this might be like self-imposed things, that I'm creating these narratives in my head. But I think there is something real about this just deeper connection and warmth that I feel towards my people because of a shared language like that. And yeah, I don't know. That would be sort of anybody who's like always wanted to learn Spanish and it's just hard as an adult, which trust me, it 110% is. If you needed another reason, if you needed something, a way to challenge yourself to give you that little extra push, I can honestly say like me being able to speak it and get by to a degree and getting better at it and seeing myself get better at it, I feel far more connected to my people, and in turn, I feel like I know myself even more, and there's something beautiful about that, especially as we talk about this idea of community and what so much of this podcast was based upon, and so much of what many of us were longing for. There definitely is something about language preservation, and one day when I have kids, I will most definitely do whatever I have to do to make sure that they are fluent in Spanish as well, or as well as English. But I want their Spanish to actually be great and be better than mine. Um, and that's why hopefully I end up marrying somebody who's like a fluent Spanish speaker. So the pressure isn't all on me at that point. Because if it's on me to teach the kids Spanish, we're gonna be in some. These kids are gonna be in for it. Anyway, and then the idea of maintaining traditions, right? There's I mean, I think that goes without saying, right? The deeper cultural connection to it all. But there is something special about sharing that, right? In Puerto Rico, we do Three Kings Day, and I didn't grow up celebrating that. My dad did because he grew up in Puerto Rico, but when they had kids, my mom didn't grow up celebrating it. She's a New Yorican, and my dad, sort of just went along with my mom setting the tone, and we never really developed much of any tradition for the most part when it comes to the holidays. I think the only one I could really consistently think of was Thanksgiving at my Titi Gladys's house. That was like a special thing where just all of us got together. But outside of that, we didn't, and I think that's why I don't like. I don't know. People ask like, "What's your favorite holiday?" And I'll just kind of reluctantly be like, "I guess it's Christmas." It lasts the longest, sort of. But I don't have that deep, like rooted connection to it. And I think it's because, there's not something personal to it, And again, going to Puerto Rico a lot, I've been there now in January, and in Puerto Rico, they they start Christmas basically from November until the end of January. There's always something going on, and I've spent um, multiple years. I've gone there in January, like throughout the month at different times, and it's so festive. There's always something going on. There's some street parade going on, and and it just feels special. And again, of course, it feels special because it's different than what I'm used to. We're here, it's like New Year's hits and boom, everything is over. There, they really savor it and go all out and do all these little things. And I think there's something beautiful again about that. Even just the way that they elongate the holiday, and it's like these 3 months of just like something always going on. I think there's something beautiful about that. Something that makes you incredibly present that I think we're lacking here in the States. And for me, I haven't done a great job of it. I want to get back on it, but I wanted to make Three Kings Day something that I carried on. Like, even though maybe I didn't grow up celebrating it, I wanted to start a tradition that then I can pass down to my kids, and we make it a thing here. And that's something I feel like I could be really proud of. And I have to study up on. I'm actually gonna do it this year. I'm challenging myself. We did it one year. I had like my parent when I first got my place. I had my parents over for dinner and like made it a little thing, but it was all like done so last minute, and I feel like I didn't really like. We basically just made another day to get dinner. I want to actually like dive into a bit of the deeper strategy behind the holiday and what it means and all those different things. That's the goal this year. So I think I had mentioned like challenging ourselves. I think there's something special to be passed down, because listen, this shit can be lost, right? Like, think about it. In my lineage, my dad could be the last generation that carried on the tradition of Three Kings Day, and that's it. It's over for Ramos. Our bloodline. It's over. Nobody's gonna think to even carry on that tradition that has existed for generations to come in our family. And when you think about that, it's fucking scary and like sad. But that's how we lose culture. That's how we lose a bit of ourselves. That's how we become like another faceless person in the crowd here in this melting pot that is the United States, is by not maintaining those parts of ourselves. And you gotta think like our families for generations, like against all odds, fought to keep certain traditions alive. And I feel like my generation and younger, we've so easily forgotten about them. And listen, life is hard also. And because if you don't grow up in an area where there's a lot of people from your background, it is very easy to not feel like you have to do these things or that they are very important, or that they're important at all. Um, but again, that's how our culture gets lost. It gets watered down. It gets whitewashed. It gets forgotten. And we have this beautiful, vibrant culture throughout the Latin diaspora. And I would hate for other generations to come to not be able to experience that, to not feel that connection, that human, you know, that innate human need for community that our culture can very much so uh, provide. So that's sort of what's been on my mind, I guess, with this and in reflecting on this article. I'll, of course, put a link in the show notes. I want to touch base on just a couple, I guess, personal anecdotes as well that I recognize over this last holiday. So we'll do that in our Mi Gente segment. Mi Gente. All right, so I want to share some personal anecdotes, I guess, that got me on this thought process. I just thought of one that I wasn't even going to bring up, but I'll touch on it in a second. But like anybody else, we're all going through shit in life. It's up and down, and it's a roller coaster ride. You have your good days, your bad days, your days where you just feel slightly off. So I go through those things, and I last week was like a much needed week off. I was just really, really tired. I had been doing a lot, like a lot of the gigging with DJing kicks my ass because I have so much other shit that I do on it, like in the morning and stuff. So I really never get a chance to recover from that. Um, so it was nice to kind of start resting and things, but I was still a little bit like I was definitely tired. Like Thanksgiving, I DJ'd that night before for Thanksgiving Eve, and so getting up on Thanksgiving, I was like, I'm excited to hang out with my family, I'm excited to eat, but I'm just fucking exhausted. And when I'm tired, depression and anxiety can kind of creep up a little bit heavier than normal. But I remember my mom calling me that day, and it was like, um, she was telling me to pick up like some medalla, like the beer from Puerto Rico. They sell it around me, and that was like a fun little moment. Like, oh, I'm gonna share like a beer with my dad, and they have it here, right? It's like a beautiful thing, like a beer from Puerto Rico. We can have that moment, but being on the phone and I could hear in the background they're playing salsa music, like I guess as she's cooking, and I just felt like this wave of peace and happiness wash over me just from hearing that, right? And the visual that kind of came to my mind as like they're blasting salsa music and my mom is just in the kitchen cooking and I assume they're cleaning up the house because they're gonna have guests over. And that brought me back to my childhood and like good childhood memories, that feeling like I don't know, there's nothing like Latin music, man. And that overwhelming just sensation of just happiness, right? And that rhythm that just it takes over you and you want to move, you want to dance, you want to express yourself, right? And that's what again one of the things I love about being in Puerto Rico is like everywhere I go I hear that ritmo, right? The rhythm and um the sounds of my people, and it's upbeat and it's about being happy and dancing and all these things. There's something so peaceful and comforting about that, right? I didn't appreciate that until I kind of went on this journey of finding myself, I liked the music and I liked people like Mark Anthony and things like that, and I would listen to it from time to time, but it was just like music to me. It didn't have a deeper meaning to me. It didn't have a spiritual connection that like it does now when I hear it, where I'm instantly just brought to a place of being able to, I think, let my guard down a little bit. And yeah, I don't recognize how meaningful it is until I stop and reflect, and as we talk about staying connected to your culture, I think music is a huge part of that, right? It was one of the ways that we kept our culture alive amidst colonization and all these different things was the music, and it was a form of rebellion at times. And it's just one of those things that immediately you hear it and like these are my people. And yeah, I view it so differently now. The music that my parents listened to growing up, I listen to it now as an adult, and I appreciate it from a completely different perspective. I just value it, as like, oh, this is a part of me. And it's one of the things I 100% like attribute to me feeling so connected to my culture and my community is the fact that that music is consistently played in my household now as an adult. I have records of Hector Lavoe, of Willie Colon, of Ruben Blades, of a bunch of people I listen to it in my car, and now this next generation of the Bad Bunnies of the world keep me very much so connected and, remind me of this place that lives vividly in my heart, and this culture. And there's just something special about it, and the other thing I was gonna say that I was just thinking of now, like I had gone on a date recently, we went to dinner and I'd found out about this like speakeasy bar in New York that was like, um, like Latin themed, and it's called what's it called? Nena. And it's like all Latin vibes, Latin drinks. And the girl I was on a date with was Latina, and we went in there and like they're playing amazing music and like the drinks and everything's just dope. And it was like, and I want to just say preface this: love who you love, be with who you want to be with. There's no right, no wrong. Whoever it is, regardless of their cultural background. Now, for me personally, and it's not like the end all be all, but for me personally, there is a sense of comfort in dating somebody from my culture. There's obviously a sense of attraction, but like in that moment, I'm sitting there with this girl and she's like singing along to songs and she knows fucking Spanish fluently, so she's far better than I am. But um, there was just like this vibrance happening where everything just felt in sync. And again, this isn't a fucking commentary on who you should fall in love with or whatever it might be. Because on the flip side of that, my brother-in-law is Italian, but he loves Puerto Rican culture and like wants to learn and like loves being a part of it. And like it's fun to teach him things and to show him things, right? That's also like a positive. Like it's a really fun experience to like invite him into our world because he like can't get enough of it, right? And on the flip side of it, dating somebody who is of the same culture or of the Latin diaspora, for me, it was fun to not be on the teaching end, right? To sort of be on the like the end of picking her brain and sort of her setting a bit of a vibe of like, the fact that she was more knowledgeable on certain things, or she was a better dancer than I was at, you know, and that was like fun for me because it was like, oh, I'm like getting to know this person, but I'm also at the same time, I feel like I'm getting to know myself on a deeper level in the process. And there was something really beautiful about that. And again, I think it just speaks to the greater idea of this conversation is asking yourself and challenging yourself to the idea of in what ways can I create a deeper and more meaningful connection to my culture with the knowledge that in doing so, I'm going to create a more deeper and meaningful connection to myself. Like, I don't think I could honestly say I'm living authentically if it wasn't for the fact that I did a lot of deep diving into my culture as a Puerto Rican, as a Latino, and really pushed myself to be in those spaces. Being in those spaces and learning and challenging myself and finding my place in it taught me so much about who I am as a person. And that's what's been so beautiful about this journey and why I wanted to kind of bring this up, particularly as we go into the holidays. Now, with all that said, let's tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusion Stew.
Time for conclusion soup.
All right, so not much to tie into here. I feel like I kind of like give a great closing sentence. I feel like at the end of that Mi Gente segment, but I think just a reminder. I think a reminder of what's important, why it's important, of this journey that I think we're all on, of the idea of finding oneself, the idea of living authentically, and I think the gift that we have as Latinos is we are not very far removed from our ancestry, right? Many of us, our parents are immigrants or our grandparents were. Many of our parents have some sort of connection to where they're from, right? And I'm speaking generally, but that's the general beauty that we have as Latinos. We are not very far removed from the motherland. And again, if you are, it doesn't mean you're lesser than or you can't go on your journey or whatever. But I think generally speaking, we have that beautiful connection or potential for connection. And again, I can speak to my own experience and really say, like, I didn't truly find myself until I really began to have a deeper understanding and a deeper love for my culture. That led to me really, I think, finding a way and finding a way to celebrate myself and to appreciate myself and to put myself in spaces where I felt like I was in community, and that changed my life for the better, without a doubt. So, yeah, that's the conversation I wanted to have today. And yeah, hold me to this 3 Kings Day. We're going to do it this year. I have like a month to prepare, so we're definitely doing that. And I challenge you to find something that maybe is a culture from your tradition that you might have lost sight of, or just making a note of something you want to continue doing and something you want to introduce for yourself, for your kids, those around you, whatever it might be. There's something beautiful about that, and it's up to us to do the work to continue on the tradition, because it can live or die with us, right? And I would want to make sure that I'm doing my part, that the next generation gets to experience all that our beautiful cultures have to offer. So yeah, that's my piece on this topic here. With that said, it's nice to be back. I will catch y'all on Thursday with a brand new episode. Till then, stay safe and we'll talk soon. Peace.